listening. "At least the boys do. S'pose the girls all right." "You hush up about 'em," was Glory's reply. Her own children's blood was thoroughly mixed, although less so than the blood of her grandkids, and she wasn't about to have anyone comment on what was as obvious as burnt toast on snow. For mixed blood was not the disgrace it had been in centuries past. It no longer made anyone anathema. But George blew out his lips. He sucked on his teeth. From the corners of his eyes he watched the young Campbells. "They not fitting good into Jamaica," he pointed out. This assessment didn't deter Glory. At least that was how it seemed to her grandchildren in the days leading up to their exodus from East Acton. Glory sold the furniture. She boxed up the kitchen. She sorted through clothes. She packed the suitcases, and when they were not enough to include everything that her granddaughter Ness wished to take to Jamaica, she folded those garments into her shopping trolley and declared that they'd pick up a suitcase on the way. They made a ragtag parade weaving over to Duquesne Road. Glory led the way in a navy winter coat that hung to her ankles, with a green and orange turban tied round her head. Little Toby came second, tripping along on his tiptoes as was his habit, an inflated life ring round his waist. Joel struggled to keep up third, the 2 suitcases he carried making his progress difficult. Ness brought up the rear, in jeans so tight it was hard to see how she was going to manage to sit without splitting them open, teetering along on 4-inch heels with black boots climbing up her legs. She had the shopping trolley in her grip, and she wasn't happy about having to drag it along behind her. She wasn't happy about anything, in fact. Her face dripped scorn, and her gait spoke contempt. On the bus, even in a place like London, where everything that might possibly be seen had already been seen at one time or another, the Campbell children still garnered looks, each for a reason peculiar to the individual. In Toby, it was the great bald patches across his head, where his half-grown hair was wispy and far too thin for a 7-year-old boy, as well as the life ring, which took up too much space and from which he resolutely refused to be parted. In Ness, it was the unnatural darkness of her skin, obviously enhanced by makeup, as if she were trying to be more of what she only partially was. Had she shed her jacket, it would also have been the rest of her clothing beyond her jeans. The sequined top that left her midriff bare and put her voluptuous breasts on display. And in Joel it was, and would always be, his face covered by the tea-cake-sized splotches that could never be called freckles, but were instead a physical expression of the ethnic and racial battle that his blood had gone through from the moment of his conception. Like Toby, it was his hair as well, in his case wild and unruly, springing from his head like a rusty scouring pad. Only Toby and Joel looked as if they might be related, and none of the Campbell children looked like someone who might belong to Glory. When the bus ventured along Ladbroke Grove in the vicinity of Chesterton Road, Glory reached for the red button and thumbed it firmly. She said, "Out, you lot," to the kids, and they shoved their way down the aisle with all of their belongings and clambered into the blessedly cold air. This place, of course, was nowhere near Jamaica, nor was it within shouting distance of any airport where a plane could take them in a westerly direction. But before these facts could be pointed out to her, Glory adjusted her turban, pushed askew as she'd struggled down the aisle, and she said to the children, "Can't be heading off for Jamaica without saying our goodbyes to your auntie, now can we?" Auntie was Glory's only daughter, Kendra Osborne. Although she lived a single bus ride away from East Acton, the Campbell children had seen her only a few times in the time they'd lived with Glory, on the obligatory Christmas and Easter Sunday get-togethers. To say that she and Glory were estranged, though, would be to misrepresent the matter. The truth was that neither woman approved of the other, and their disapproval revolved around men. To be present in Henchman Street more than 2 days a year would have required Kendra to see George Gilbert lounging unemployed and unemployable around the house. To pay a call in North Kensington might have exposed Glory to any one of the string of Kendra's lovers, taken up, then quickly discarded. The two women considered their lack of physical contact a truce. The telephone served them well enough. Thankfully, it was not an overlong walk from Ladbroke Grove to Edenham Estate. The little group trudging along the street had their sights fixed upon Portobello Bridge, and soon enough they were across it. Here, a short distance along Elkstone Road and well within the unremitting roar of the Westway flyover, Edenham Estate was plopped down next to a meandering park called Meanwhile Gardens. Central to this estate was Trellick Tower, and it presided over the landscape with unjustified pride, 30 floors of Grade 2 listed concrete, with a west-facing aspect of balconies by the hundreds, sprouting upon them satellite dishes, motley windbreaks, and flapping lines of laundry. Its separated lift shaft, joined to the building by a system of bridges, gave the tower its single distinction. Spread out beneath this tower was the rest of the estate, comprising blocks of flats, a home for the elderly, and 2 lines of terrace houses that backed onto Meanwhile Gardens. It was in one of these terrace houses that Kendra Osborne lived, and Glory shepherded her grandkids to this place, dropping her Sainsbury's bags upon the top step with a sigh of relief. Joel set down his burden of suitcases and rubbed his sore hands along the sides of his jeans. Toby looked around and blinked as he fingered his life ring spasmodically. Ness shoved her shopping trolley into the door of the garage, crossed her arms beneath her breasts, and cast a baleful look upon her grandmother, one which clearly said, "What's next, bitch?" Glory turned from the girl and resolutely rang the bell. Daylight was fading, and while time was not exactly of the essence, considering Glory's game plan, she was becoming anxious for the next part of their lives to begin. When there was no response, she rang a second time. "Looks like we won't be saying any goodbyes here, Gran," was Ness's acidulous comment. "Guess we'll just have to go on to Jamaica, won't we, Gran?" Ness had come no farther than the path itself. "Guess we just have to leave Aunt Ken a note." Glory told the children to sit on the slab that went for the porch, although anyone could see there was little enough space to do so. Joel and Toby cooperated, hunkering down among the carrier bags, but Ness stood back, and her expression said that she was just waiting for the inevitable excuses to come pouring out of her grandmother's mouth. Glory said, "I make a place for you, and it take time when you make a place. So I go ahead and I send for you when things are ready in Jamaica." Ness blew out a derisive breath. She looked around to see if there was someone nearby who might bear witness to her grandmother's lies. She said, "We staying with Aunt Kendra, then? She know that, Gran? She even round here? She on holiday? She move house? How you even know where she is?" Glory cast Ness a look, but gave her attention to the boys, who were so much more likely to bend their behaviour to her plan. At 15, Ness was too street-wary. At 11 and 7, Joel and Toby still had a great deal ahead of them to learn. "Talked to your auntie yesterday," she said. "She's out at the shops. She laying on something special for your tea." Another derisive breath from Ness. A solemn nod from Joel, a restless shifting from one buttock to the other from Toby. He plucked at Joel's jeans. Joel put his arm around Toby's shoulders. This sight warmed the 1 or 2 cockles that actually existed in Glory's heart. They would all be fine, she told herself. Glory kissed the top of Joel's head, saying, "You are a good lad, love," and she patted Toby diffidently. She picked up her suitcase and 2 of the carrier bags, and she backed away, drawing in a deep breath. She didn't actually like leaving them on their own like this, but she knew that Kendra would be home soon. Glory hadn't phoned her in advance, but aside from her little problem with men, Kendra lived by the book, responsibility incarnate. She had a job, and she was training for another, to get back on her feet after her last disastrous marriage. She was heading towards a real career. No way in hell was Kendra off anywhere unexpected. She'd be back soon. It was, after all, a bit past tea time. That said, she turned to leave them.